Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hopefully, inshallah, everyone can hear me well. Please let me know if the sound is working okay. I apologize for coming online late. When I'm in my office, people see the windows open and the car in the parking lot, so they assume that the masjid is open, and they kind of come into the masjid and they want to have conversations. So I apologize for coming a little late. Sometimes it's difficult to nicely tell someone that you have to go, and especially if people haven't been in the masjid for a long time, I usually don't like to maybe kick people away or something. So I apologize for coming online late, but inshallah I will try to remain on time and stay focused next time, so that 4 to 5 is our reserved time for this class, so I don't waste my time or yours, and that we benefit as much as possible. So allow me to start again by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Tawakkaltu ala Allah Rabbi yassir ya Kareem. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. All praises due to Allah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His Prophet and his family and companions and their followers and us with them with showers of peace and blessings. Welcome to our Principles of Islamic Faith class. This is the second class in this kind of series of classes that will aim at covering what is known as al-ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura, or the things that every Muslim should know. We started with tahara because that's the one thing that we all get to do multiple times a day. And then I figured, we should have actually started with principles of faith, because if your faith is shaken, then you don't actually do tahara and you don't pray, and nothing after that matters. So we got to start with the foundation, which is your Islam, your faith, the principles of our beliefs. What do we believe as Muslims as regard to Allah, the messengers and prophets, the hereafter, and all the matters that are of the heart? And once we get this foundation solid and strong, we can then have another session on prayers, and then another session on other forms of ibadah. So this class, while it is actually geared towards the young adults, the youth of our community, but I really think genuinely anyone can benefit from it. Whether you are 15 years old or 50 years old, I think that if you attend the classes and just pay minimum attention, you will leave with something that you will benefit from greatly. Especially that the subject matter of this class is really important. It's our beliefs. It's what we believe in, in our hearts, which is very subtle, very very sensitive subject, and requires patience, and requires that we delve into it with both, logic and reasoning, and using our mind, but also looking at the evidence that we have from the Quran and the Sunnah and so on and so forth. So whether you are a parent or a child, both of you inshallah will benefit. And I will try to keep the language as as minimally kind of linguistically correct, or even kind of academic, so that everyone can benefit. But at the same time, at a certain level, I trust the maturity of even the young adults that are listening. If you have any question, always feel free to send it to me on the WhatsApp group or here on YouTube, or keep it until the end of the session and then send it, and I can discuss it with you either privately or publicly, so that everyone can benefit. But don't at all hesitate to stop me and say, hey, you've said something I don't understand, or this concept I struggle to understand it. Again, when it comes to our belief, we should not really settle with not understanding or being confused or having half an understanding or having doubts. We We should do our very best to, to understand very well. And if we don't have an understanding of our faith, we need to ask questions and ask more questions and ask repeated questions until we reach a moment of certainty in our hearts. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this, which is known as yaqeen, or certainty, when you know something with no doubts whatsoever. So let me say that Islamic theology, which is the subject we are going to study, what we studied with Tahara is called Islamic fiqh, or jurisprudence, the rules of do and don't. Here we study theology, which is the subject matter of belief. What things we believe in and what things we don't believe in. And it has always been like this area of great interest and richness at the same time of study. Since Muslims kind of moved from the Arab Peninsula around where Islam was kind of, started to spread. But then Islam moved out of Arabia, and Muslims started to live with people who were either non-Muslims or revert or convert Muslims, whether in Africa or Persia or even Europe, just around the world. Muslims was encouraged to travel, get to know different cultures, get to mix with people. They never were afraid to do that. And that was an amazing thing because it impacted people and people started to accept Islam. And now we live in an era where the majority of Muslims are actually not Arabs. So we kind of are indebted to the sense of adventure of the early Muslims from the time of the Sahaba and onward. So since Muslims started to move and mix with non-Arabs and mixed with not just non-Arabs but non-Muslims or Muslims who came from different religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrian, okay, I will not even try to say this word, but it's the religion of many people who lived in the Persian Peninsula, which is current day Iran. They started to mix with people and who had inherited a rich and heavy amount of theological questions. So people who were becoming Muslims were like, I have this idea about God, or I have this concept about what a prophet or a messenger is. I have this idea or this concept of belief and faith. Is this what Islam teaches? Is this something that Islam really approves or approve of? Or, is this something different? So people had questions, which is an amazing thing. And that's actually for you young adults who are listening, and for parents, if your children have question, and no matter how weird this question might be or might be shocking to you, that's great. That's how belief is formed. When people ask hard questions, difficult questions, but questions of interest in faith. So if your child come to you and say, hey, mom, dad, does God has a body? Does God reside in a specific place? Or if you, as listening to me, a young adult who are saying, you know what, sometimes I get these images in my head about God being a person or having a hand or leg or something. This is good because you start forming, being curious and start learning, and now start asking the right questions, and hopefully you'll have someone that will give you the right answers. Hopefully. So even though this idea, of theology, it's actually became known as kalam. Kalam in Arabic means speech or talking. Why was it called kalam? It was called kalam or speaking or talking because people started to talk about their faith. And they started to actually talk a lot and have a lot of conversations, long conversations about their faith. And that's why the science of studying faith in Islam or theology has become known as ilmul kalam, the knowledge of speaking, speech, talking, having conversations, lengthy ones about faith. And even though this kalam science developed as a response to this new situations where Muslims are mingling with non-Muslims or revert or convert Muslims, that required Islam to give its own view on various and more intricate and complicated questions. Again, I go back and I say, if you are a young adult or you're a parent and you're hearing hard questions, complicated questions, intricate questions, do not be shocked and do not shush these questions. In fact, encourage them as long as you are able to give them the right answers, or direct them to the person who gives them the right answers. An average Muslim like me, you, and everyone else, we aren't really required to get involved in like an academic debate that requires like long reading and sophisticated mentality and philosophy and philosophizing. We don't really need to be on that level of studying faith. However, every single Muslim, every one of us is required to strengthen our faith, free ourselves from the bondage of blind imitation. What does it mean? It means that you just are not a Muslim because your parents are Muslims. That's not what Islam is about. And that's why we should study a minimal work of Islamic Aqidah or theology or Ilm al-Kalam or whatever you want to call it. So we need to strengthen our faith, to make our faith strong, and we need to free ourselves from blind imitation. I'm a Muslim because my parents are Muslims. My parents are Muslim because their parents are Muslims, and so on and so forth. No, that shouldn't be who we are. Because when we are Muslims, because our parents are Muslims, it's very easy for us to have doubts, and becomes very easy for us nowadays to denounce Islam even, which is a reality and a sad one, which comes from the reason of being imitating in the matters of faith. Imitating meaning just following blindly without forming a strong state of belief. We do that, we free ourselves by knowing some simple proofs that allow us and allow the tenets of our belief to make sense to us. When we believe in God, we need this idea of God to make sense to us. When we say the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we need that to make sense to us. When we say we believe in the afterlife, we need this to make sense to us. When we say we believe in the, in grave and the state of being in grave and questioning and things like this, in heavens, in hell, we need these things to make sense. Otherwise, we may fall into this trap of doubts and confusion that many people fall in, especially these days. So, in their attempt to make the tenets of belief easy and understandable and reasonable to the average Muslims, scholars have written simple works. We call them treatises, we call them expositions, we call them books, whatever you want to call them, of Islamic belief, that suit any individual who is willing to know what they should really believe in, like you and me. With just a minimal amount of curiosity about faith, studying any of these great works can really benefit us greatly, protect us from doubt, and protect our children, our lives from, many questions that we are faced with and we either brush under the rug or ignore, or get scared when we have them. So any of these works and expositions of Islamic belief, if you study it with someone who is knowledgeable, and if an English translation is available, we study them, we take our time, it really saves our belief. And one of these great scholars of Islam that has done us a service by authoring and pinning down one of these expositions of Islamic belief, his name is Shaykh al-Islam Burhan al-Din al-Bajuri. Shaykh al-Islam is his title, and it's a great title. We probably don't have it anymore. We don't have it anymore, but people used to, up until the time of the Ottomans, used to have this title of Shaykh al-Islam, the great Shaykh of Islam. Meaning they have a scholarly authority over Muslims of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Sunni Muslims, and in all the lands. So we call them Shaykh al-Islam. So one of these Shuyukh al-Islam is al-Imam al-Bajuri, Burhan al-Din al-Bajuri. We will look at his biography in just a little bit. And this man assumed a leadership and what we would call sheikhdom, like kingdom, blah, 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 this dom or this dom. We call this sheikhdom. He became this great sheikh of Islam. uh, of the Grand Al Azhar Mosque in Cairo. I actually went to Al Azhar in Egypt. That's where I studied and received my early education and up to the college and university education. And I'm very, alhamdulillah, proud to have studied there because it's a great institution that throughout the years maintained a scholarly approach to studying Islam. And so Imam al-Bajuri was at a certain point, he was the grand sheikh of Al-Azhar mosque and university and school in Cairo. And he was a prolific writer and a great teacher. And that's great because sometimes you have a great mind, but they are bad teachers. You know, great mind, but bad teachers. We may have great teachers, but bad writers. So their work and their teaching, you have to sit down at their feet to learn from them, and otherwise you cannot benefit from them. But when you have a great knowledgeable person, great teacher, and great writer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a great blessing in that, because they can teach people, they have great knowledge, sound knowledge, and they can write things that that transcends their times. So right now, years later, we are here going to study, inshallah, his works. And without a doubt, the times we live in right now have seen like a wave of atheism. And I'm sure many of you, especially even the young ones, more than even the adults, know what atheism is. Atheism meaning the disbelief in God, meaning that you don't believe that there is a deity out there. And also something called agnosticism. Agnosticism mean I really don't know. People who say, well, I don't know. Is there a God? Is there not a God? I don't know. There must be a God, but I really don't know who that God is. What is the name of that God? What are the attributes of that God? How does God work in the world? I don't know. That's called agnosticism. Atheism means that you don't believe in a deity at all. Agnosticism means that you don't know. You don't know what this God is. What do we call God? How do we worship God? So there's a difference between atheism and agnosticism. And there is no doubt, and I'm sure if you are listening to me and you're 12, 13, 14, 15, or even more, you know someone at school who tells you, oh, I'm atheist, I'm agnostic, I don't know, I don't believe, blah, blah, blah. We all have dealt with that at all ages. And that spread kind of far and wide around the world, including in Muslim majority nations and in Muslim communities. As much as we like to know that or believe that our communities are perfect and we don't have any trouble, we do have trouble, and including the trouble of atheism and agnosticism in our communities and in Muslim countries as well. I come from Egypt and I know for sure that the wave of atheism and agnosticism, especially in the last 10 plus years, is on the rise, like with the speed of light. And I believe one of the reasons is that as Muslims, we don't do a good job answering the most important questions and the most difficult questions as well. You know, we have a lot of classes where we teach the history, we teach the rules of reciting Quran, we teach the stories of prophets and all of that, but we rarely ever have a class where we teach the principles of faith, because again, it's a sensitive subject that requires patience and requires that we delve into big questions. What is God? Who is God? What are the attributes of God? These are big questions. But you should know that even young people, and you are listening to me whether you are young or old, young people ask these questions nowadays. And we have got to engage in these conversations. Not anymore, burying our heads in the sand. As a child, I am sure many of us were taught something along these lines. The Quran is a divine text revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, who himself came as a mercy to mankind to teach us how to live. To live our life in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah will ultimately mean entrance into heaven. Now, a young person accepts this and will probably typically not question the reality of these statements above that I just said or read to you. However, all the time. We see that as many individuals have grown older, they start to or begin to question and doubt these statements, or at least say, what does this really mean? I accepted it as a child, or I accept it now, but what does it really, really mean? Now, in the context of this situation, the worst thing that can happen, and inshallah doesn't happen much to any of us, but it happens and it's a reality. Many leave with doubts that are unresolved. Doubts that unresolved until they grow up and they start reading or studying, and finally at the age of 20 or 30 or 40 they start getting their questions answered. Unfortunately, there are a lot of reasons we could discuss why this happened. Yet, many Muslims never resolve the doubts and insecurities they have about their faith. I call it this the faith insecurities. Young people, I'm sure you hear me when you go to school, you might have some insecurities. You're not tall enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, you're not strong enough, blah, blah, blah. You have insecurities. We all have it. Let's be true and real. And these insecurities, yes, they are bad. They make our life difficult and miserable. Sadly, especially if you get bullied or people call you names or something. But worse than that is the insecurities of faith. Because insecurity of faith can go unresolved, can go unnoticed by people. And if it does, in many instances or situations, that can lead people to leave their faith or become agnostic. And I always hear from parents, please, my son or my daughter has this question, and they keep asking, and the concern regarding Muslim youth who no longer identify with their faith, or I am worried about my child, I'm worried about my brother, I'm worried about my sister, I'm worried about my friend. I hear this even from Sunday school students, young people. With that being said, inshallah, we are going to go into this adventure. I hope and I think it's going to be exciting adventure to study this wonderful and amazing work by this esteemed Imam of Al-Azhar, Imam al-Bajuri, knowing that the need to study Aqidah, has never been needed and more stronger than our times. The word Aqidah itself, and I want you to take note on that. What does Aqidah mean? We hear this word sometimes. You probably have heard this word before. If you haven't, now you hear it for the first time. Aqidah may be translated into theology or creed. But what does it mean in Arabic? You know that it comes from the Arabic root of aqada, which means to hold tightly and to make a knot. This is like to say that your heart is like a sack. Inside of it, you are going to put your belief, and you're gonna tightly tie it or tie a knot around your heart so that your belief is not lost. So Aqidah means to study something that allows you to not lose your faith. Let me repeat that one more time. Aqidah means to study the principles that will allow you to not lose your faith. Please take a note on this, because I'm going to ask you later, what is Aqidah? So that you say to yourself today, after today's session, you go and you say, okay, my parents told me that I need to watch this live class with Imam Hassan, or I've just watched this recording of the class. What exactly are we going to study? You are going to study with me the principles that inshallah will allow you to never lose your faith, inshallah, by Allah's will, if you follow and if you understand, because it will be like a tie you knot around your heart. Inshallah. We'll do that by looking at Quran, by looking at the teachings of the Prophet, and by looking at reasonable arguments and conversations that we will have that will be based on, rationality, reasoning, and arguments that make sense. And that's the way every Muslim should feel when it comes to the fundamental beliefs of Islam. Not just you. Every Muslim should feel that way. Anyone who does not feel that way, they need to embark on a study of the sort. We should all have firm belief and strong conviction and certainty in our hearts. And it's our hope and inshallah, aspiration that after studying together, this will introduce, hopefully, and kind of enhance and inshallah solidify the belief of anyone who's actually studying this with me, especially young people, especially the youth, but anyone, inshallah, anyone. Now, Islamic theology or aqidah, this science of studying the principles that will allow you to never lose your faith, inshallah, is one of the most important and central most sciences of Islamic scholarship. So when people study Islam, it's one of the very beginning. The first step they start with is studying a short text of aqidah. It allows us to learn the attributes of God, the Creator. So you will learn the attributes of God. The prophets, alayhimus salatu wassalam. You're going to learn what is a prophet, who is a prophet, what are the qualities of a prophet. The unseen realm, so you're going to learn about things that we don't have any way to see, but we have reasonable ways to believe in, such as the afterlife, heaven, hell, the state of grave, and so on and so forth, and all the matters pertaining to them. So God is one section, the prophets is another section, and the unseen realm is another section. Okay? So these are three kind of main sections of the sessions we will be spending together in the next, who knows, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. And the study of this science of aqidah allows us to remove any doubt and gain certitude in our belief. So when you ask yourself, what will this class do to me? Here's what it will do. Insha'Allah, by Allah's willing, I cannot guarantee, but insha'Allah, the hope is that will remove any doubt you have, will give you a state of certitude, meaning that you'll be certain about the matters that I just said to you. God, the attributes of God, prophets and messengers and their quality as people, and why do we believe them and why we should follow them, and then finally the unseen realm of this life that we live. Angels and revelation and so on and so forth. By studying that, it also safeguards us from any distorted or deviant ideas, and there are so many of them out there, so many of them. If you are a fan of Disney movies, we have so many ideas thrown around, whether deliberately or not, that are distorted and deviant ideas. And while we cannot live in isolation, where we don't watch movies, we don't listen to discussions, we don't have friends, we cannot live this kind of life. But what we can do is that we can safeguard ourselves by building a strong foundation of belief. It's like being in a storm. If you brace yourself, hold on tight, let the storm come and go, and you will not be affected, inshallah. And for that reason, that considered what we call an individual obligation, fard ayn. Remember the rules of wudu, fard ayn. They are individual obligation on you. Once you hit that age of puberty, okay, whether a boy or a girl, does not matter. Once you hit that age, which many of you may have already, and many of you may be on your way there very soon, in matters of maybe a year or two, or matter of months or two, it doesn't matter. Once you hit that age, it becomes an obligation on you to know the knowledge, the essential knowledge of Islamic belief, the essential knowledge of wudu, the essential knowledge of prayers, and so on, and everything that you must do. At least these three things: wudu, prayers, and Islamic faith. Everything else, and fasting and everything that becomes obligation on you. You are obliged to know these things. After you know them, play PS4, PlayStation, whatever you want, but at least know these things. Go to bed knowing these things. You will be in the safe zone. And for that reason, we have someone like Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. If you don't know who he is, inshallah, we might have a class on these great individuals of our faith. Imam Abu Hanifa, he actually had a title that no one else had it. His name was Al-Imam Al-A'zam, the greatest Imam. He founded the first Islamic school of law. Al-Imam Al-A'zam, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, the greatest Imam. He wrote a small book on Islamic theology or Aqidah. He called it Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar, the greatest science to be understood. Meaning, if you understand these principles that we will study in this, inshallah, class, it's okay to be ignorant about many other things, if not all things, after that. And I mean quite clearly what I'm saying. You know, it's amazing to be a knowledgeable person in this science or that science and know many names for prophets and messengers and know many things about fiqh and prayers and Quran and this and that. But then I ask you, tell me the attributes of God that you worship, and you're like, I don't know. Like, if you know God, you know the prophets, you know, and the qualities and you know of prophets and messengers, you know matters of the unseen, it doesn't hurt you after that to be semi-ignorant or ignorant in other matters. I'm not inviting people to be ignorant, but I'm saying this is how important what we are about to study in this class, inshallah. Allah says in the Quran, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Surah Muhammad 47, verse number 19. Allah says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that there is no God but Allah. Let me repeat the translation again. Know that there is no God but Allah. This is only one ayah from the Quran which the scholars looked at and then they said, it is obligatory to actually know, certainty that there is no and cannot be another God beside Allah. Not simply believe or follow what your dad and your mom told you. No, it is obligatory to know that. And knowledge requires that you ask and you search for the truth to be able to reach to this state of certainty. I can tell you, as your father, for example, there is a country called China. And you will say, yeah, my dad told me that. I'm sure my dad won't lie to me. But unless you look at it on a map, and in fact, unless you go there and you get on an airplane, hopefully not right now, and travel across the globe and go to that country and you see a sign that says, welcome to China. Now you're like, yes, I know that there's a country called China. Before that, you're like, yeah, my dad told me that, and my dad doesn't lie. But once you actually get on an airplane and travel and see that, or acquire that knowledge, it is not as strong as when someone tells you that. Al-Imam Al-Ghazali says, your worship is not acceptable unless you know whom you are worshipping. You know God, you worship God, your worship is not really meaningful, and according to Imam Al-Ghazali, not even acceptable until you know who you are worshipping. Because what if you are worshipping something or someone that you think is God, you were told is God through your parents or grandparents or your culture or your mosque, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's not what God is. And I have been worshipping my entire life someone or something or a deity that is not really what is true. Many people in other faiths do that. They grow up, they are told that this idol right there or that image is God, and they worship and they don't ask questions. They don't, search for the truth for their own. And you cannot say, well, but I grew up in a Muslim household, so thanks mom and dad, I don't need to go into an investigative study of faith. No, you still do need to. According to this, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that there is no God but Allah. Meaning it's on you to know that. In fact, we have a jurist, his name is Al-Akhdari. He states the first obligation upon every legally responsible person, and again, you may have hit that age already if you are listening to me, or if you are younger, then maybe you are on your way there soon, inshallah. The first obligation is to rectify your creed or your faith, meaning to have this your faith figured out by learning and studying. We also read in the Quran an instruction: ask the people of remembrance if you do not know. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge when you don't know. While it is necessary and not only recommended in matters of law, matters of fiqh, like we've studied together in the class of tahara, or purification, that was necessary on you, by the way, to know all the things we've studied then. That wasn't like, oh, that's just a luxury, class for people who have the time, or that's like, yeah, I get to learn about how to make wudu, I guess. No, that was necessary on you as a believer, as a Muslim. For one to follow a scholar who is supremely qualified to drive rulings directly from the Quran and Sunnah, like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Shafi'i, it's actually necessary on us to follow these scholars, because not everyone can look at the Quran and Sunnah and be like, here are the rules of salah or prayers or fasting. We call these people in Arabic mujtahid. Mujtahid means they have reached a state of scholarship where they can derive rulings from the Quran and from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, in Aqidah or Islamic belief, it's actually an obligation to reach the state of certitude on your own, not just blindly follow someone. So فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge when you don't know. That's in the matters of law. Okay, so let me recap this point again, because perhaps maybe it will cause people confusion. What I want to say here is that, in matters of law, like prayers and fasting and zakah and hajj and buying and selling and all of these things, it is necessary in these matters to follow a qualified scholar. And it is not required for the average Muslim to know the proofs of prayers, fasting, and fiqh on the whole. You see, when the companion used to seek fatwa or religious rulings from the learned among them, they did not ask them for the proof. So, for instance, if you come to me and say, Imam, I prayed 3 rak'ahs and I forgot that I didn't pray the 4, what should I do? And I tell you, okay, go do this or do that, for example. You are not required to tell me, give me the proof. Tell me why. You know what I mean? Tell me why I should do this. Because you are not a person who is kind of professional or have studied these rules and how we come up with the rulings in Islamic law that you will be able to understand. You're not required to tell me the proof. But when it comes to Islamic belief and aqidah, you are actually required to ask for the proof and to go after these rules and principles on your own in a way that is, that uses your mind and your brain and your reasoning capabilities to be able to reach a state of certitude where there is no doubt in your heart about these matters of faith. Now, today we find that many Muslims have like a misunderstanding that they need to know like the evidence of how to pray, how to fast, etc., etc. So Do Muslims have to learn evidence as to why they believe in Allah? Who is the Prophet and what is the qualities of that Prophet? What is our belief regarding angels and revelation from God? What is our belief regarding hell and fire? Scholars say, yes, you do. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say a lot of people engage in studying the rules of law when they don't really have to, and they forget to study the rules of belief when they actually do have to. So the things has reversed. The matter has reversed. And that's why you guys might end up with a lot of questions with no answers. A lot of questions with no answers. At the same time, you might be bombarded with a lot of answers or a lot of information that you did not really need to know. That you really did not need to know. We look, for example, in this verse from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blamed a disbelieving group from Quraysh for following their forefathers in belief without actually knowing the proof. Allah says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَإِلَى الرَّسُولِ قَالُوا حَسْبُنَا مَا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. And when it is said to them, come to believe to what Allah has revealed, come to the Prophet of God, believe in him, they say, enough for us are the ways we found our forefathers following. What? Even though their fathers were void of knowledge and guidance. So God is saying here, don't just blindly follow in matters of belief what your fathers, forefathers, your culture, your group tells you that this is how or what we believe. And that, sadly, this sentiment is still echoed today in our Muslim communities, among our Muslim youth, especially in schools and universities and with young people, environments and groups where they are asked, why are you a Muslim? They think something along these lines. I am Muslim because my parents are Muslims. Why are you wearing hijab? Because my mom told me to wear hijab. Why are you not eating pork? Because my dad told me not to eat pork. And that goes against what the Quran is teaching us. We need to know the answer to these questions. Why are you a Muslim? Why you believe in this? Why you believe in that? There is another great Imam, his name Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. May Allah have mercy on him. And he is founder of one of the two main schools of Islamic theology or creed. They're Maturidi and they're the Ash'ari. We'll get into these details later, but you don't need to know that. But you need to know that his name is Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. He stated, the muqallid in creed is a disobedient believer. Muqallid means someone who imitates other people. In creed, meaning in matters of belief. So I believe in Allah because my mom and my dad told me to do so. Or because I grew up seeing people do it, so I'm doing it like them. Is disobedient. Why? Disobedient believer? Because they did not follow the Quranic injunction and instruction of فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. They are not considered as believers. We don't say that a person who imitate their mom and dad in matters of belief is disbeliever. We don't say that. That's extremism. But we call them sinful for not doing what they're part of studying, of searching. So that takes me back to what I said earlier. You guys, if you're asking questions about your faith, you are doing the right thing. As long as your aim and your goal is to reach a true understanding, a state of certitude. And parents, if you're listening, if your child is asking questions, that is wonderful. Encourage them. Try to help them find the right answers. Don't let them go online. Don't let them ask their friends. Let them study, let them learn, let them listen to a session like this. Let them come to an imam, to a learned person, to a scholar, and continue to search to reach a state of certitude. Why? Because Allah has commanded us in this final revelation, the Quran, we must know that there is no God but Allah. فَعَلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Surah Muhammad, verse number 19. And you will notice that most of what lies in Imam al-Bajuri's text that we will be studying together does not reference revelation. Isn't that funny? Most of the things he says actually do not reference Quran or Sunnah, especially the Quran. And it's based on logic and reason. That's how you reach a state of unshaken belief. Unshaken belief. And that's especially important for Muslims living in non-Muslim majority lands like we are now live in America. An open world. We meet people online, we talk to them, we meet people in class and we talk to them, people from all over the world. And you know, when asked why they believe in God, if you say because the Quran says so, what do we call that, guys? We call that circular reasoning, and it's insufficient. It might be sufficient for someone who already believes, but of someone who does not believe in God, when you tell them because the Quran says so, well, they don't believe in Quran already. So you are doing something called circular reasoning. They will tell you, well, I don't believe in the Quran. Okay, so that's very, that's very important. That's why, to complement the logical focus of this topic and this text that we will be studying together in this class, we find there is added the like corporative proofs and references from the Quran and the Sunnah, kind of as a footnote to further strengthen the points that are made in a logical way. And ultimately, as a response to a request, Imam al-Bajuri outlines the core beliefs of what we call Orthodox Sunni doctrine or Aqidah that must be known by every Muslim. Ultimately, because Imam al-Bajuri, and not just Imam al-Bajuri, but you will find that most scholars, when they write something, they say that the reason they wrote is that someone requested them to. Many scholars say, I was requested by a friend, by a student to write on this subject, and that's what the Imam al-Bajuri has done. He says, I was requested by someone to write this, small treatise, outline the cores of Islamic belief according to the Orthodox Sunni doctrine or Aqidah, and he does so. Inshallah, this class hopefully will equip you, whether you are young or old, with the sufficient knowledge of the essentials of Islamic theology to be able to distinguish truth from falsehood, no matter where you find that. In a conversation with a non-Muslim friend, in a conversation with a Muslim, in a book, in a Sunday school class, on an online forum or video or social media post or something, you will be able to, inshallah, have the sufficient knowledge that allows you to distinguish truth from falsehood, orthodox from heterodox. What we call orthodox is like the accepted, the common, the agreed upon belief. We call Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people of Sunnah, of prophetic way, of prophetic teaching. Al Jama'ah means the majority of the community. Inshallah. Now, let us very briefly, guys, I know that I have taken a lot. Let me very briefly look at the life of this author of the book that we will be studying, because once we know who he is, next time we can start actually looking at his work. Now, the Imam, his name is Ahmad al-Bajuri or al-Bayjuri. You can call him Bajuri or al-Bayjuri. Either is fine. He was from a village within a few hours from Cairo, Egypt, named Al-Bajur. That's why he was named Al-Bajuri. His title was the Sheikh of Islam, and he was the Imam, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. He was born in 1198 after Hijrah, which is the correspondent year to 1784. 1784. He lived in a place called Giza, and Giza Giza or Giza, whichever you say, but it's called Giza in Egypt. It's kind of on the other side of the Nile. So you have Cairo, and then the Nile. You cross the Nile, you become in the this place called Giza. And he lived actually there during the French occupation. When Napoleon entered Cairo, and if you don't know, when Napoleon entered Cairo, actually, his soldiers did something very bad. They entered into the mosque of Al Azhar with their horses and with their shoes on, and they kind of defiled the mosque. And so during that time, they did that because first Al Azhar was like a central place of studying Islam. So they first wanted to do a symbolic raid or occupation of this central place of learning, and at the same time this actually backfired because the scholars of Al-Azhar, the scholars of Islam, were the people who led a kind of a revolution against the French occupation of Egypt. And so perhaps this move of power from the French backfired on them. In the year 1799, he returned to Cairo and began to study in Al-Azhar and gained popularity due to his immense knowledge. And around 1801, he began teaching in Al-Azhar, specifically in the month of Sha'ban. Why we know these details? Because scholars usually of this great rank, either historians write about them, or they make sure to write the important dates in their lives. So the date of sitting in Al-Azhar mosque, it's like the equivalent of studying to teach in Harvard or Stanford or Cambridge or Oxford. So he wrote that he started teaching in Sha'ban of the Hijri year 1216. We are now in the year 1441. So many years has passed. And he continued teaching until he passed away on Dhul Hijjah in the year 1861, or the Hijri year of 1277. And most of what he wrote and left us are commentaries or footnotes, or we call it hawashi. Hawashi means marginalia, meaning there's a main work, and then they write little notes on the side, on the margins of the book. And that's what's left for us. Amazing notes that enable us to understand major works and studies. The most important of things he left for us: works on fiqh or Islamic law or jurisprudence, works of aqidah, works of seerah, and much more. The text we will be studying, inshallah, in this class is a simple but comprehensive. You will find it simple, but you will find it, encompassing everything almost that you as a student of Islamic faith and principles of Islamic faith most important and most foundational to know. We call it Aqidat Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or the creed of the people of the prophetic way and the majority of scholars. Why do we give this big title, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? I want you to take a note on that as well. The people of Sunnah, people of the prophetic way, and the majority of scholars. Why? This is very important title, by the way. And you, by believing and studying and being part, you are part of this group called the people of prophetic way and the majority of scholars, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. I want you to take a note on this, because now you know who do you belong to. When people ask you, are you Sunni, are you Shi'i, are you Sufi, are you Salafi, are you this, are you that? Tell them, I'm from Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people of the prophetic way and the majority of the scholars. And why we say that? Because number one, we have a group that will started to deviate and reject the prophetic sunnah and say we don't need sunnah, we only need Quran. Big danger. And they sugarcoat it. They say, but the Quran is good, it's the word of Allah. Who needs the prophet? Who needs the teachings of the prophet? That's the opening the door to destroying Islam from the foundation. Because without the prophetic guidance, how do we understand the Quran? The Prophet and the Sunnah of the Prophet explains and it expands our understanding of the Quran. The Prophet was a Quran walking on the ground. So we need the Sunnah, we need the Prophet in order for us to perfect and complete our understanding of the Quran. And finally, we call al-Jama'ah, or the majority of the scholars. Why? Because we have offshoots. Like from any rule, there is exceptions. And in Islam, we did have that. We have offshoots. Getting out of the majority of the scholars. Like Al-Khawarij. And you will get to learn about Al-Khawarij. They are a group of very extreme people who got out of the fold of Islam, got out of the fold of the majority of scholars, and were very small minority, offshoot. ISIS now and Al-Qaeda and all of these groups are the extension of the Khawarij, this offshoot of Islam. And that's why we safeguard this title by saying we are Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We are part of the prophetic, or the people of the prophetic way, and the majority of the scholars, according to the understanding and the creedal school or madhab of Al-Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. As we said, there is Al-Imam al-Ash'ari, Al-Imam al-Maturidi. You don't need to know that, but I just wanted to mention it. Alright, everyone, it's 5 o'clock. Jazakumullahu khair. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you benefited with anything at all. I hope you will join again. I hope you will find that our study and our time together every Friday night is beneficial to you. The recording is available afterwards on YouTube, so watch it later, share it with people. If I made any mistakes, please share with me. If you have any questions or comments, please share with me. I will be live for another 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions on any of the things I said, I hope you benefited, and I also hope you've been taking notes. Because learning is half giving, half taking. I'm giving, you need to be taking by engaging in this with an open mind and taking notes and being a good student. Thank you. Jazakumullahu khair. I'm here for 5-10 minutes if you have any questions.